Hi everyone. So in this quick video, I just want to give you a few tips on how to use a TI30XS calculator. So this is the calculator that I recommended for class, but other scientific calculators probably work very similarly to it. So if you have a calculator that has sort of the multiple display rows, then this video may help you figure out how to use some of the functions. Obviously, you want to go to your directions or I'm sure there are multiple YouTube videos on this, but what I want to focus on are two particular functions: how to use your calculator for exponents and scientific notation, because these are the things we're going to work on a lot in chemistry this year. All right, so first of all, let's just find some of the most important buttons on your calculator. So obviously you need the on-off switch, enter, which is your equals, right, clear if you need to clear any information. The negative sign on the number pad is if you want to convert a number to a negative number. The order of operations. So these are parentheses. You add them in just as you would if you were writing an equation on paper. So when you need to tell the calculator what order to do your operations in. All right, and then this second function key is also going to be critical for us. If you notice, all the buttons on your calculator have a main function, which is written in white on the actual button, and then above that, written in green, is its second function. So in order to access those functions, you need to hit that second button first. All right, and then finally, the wheel with the little arrows, this moves your cursor on the screen. So we'll get to that in just a minute. All right, as we look a little closer up, I wanted to point out the two that we are going to be using. So this first one is the log, and then the second function is the 10x. So we need that 10x when we're dealing with exponents. And then for scientific notation, we're going to use that times 10 to the n function. Some calculators I've seen this is written as EE or EXP. So locate that button on your calculator. All right, the other thing I wanted to point out was the mode function. So this is very useful. You may use this in geometry or pre-calc, the first row, but what we're going to focus on is the second row. I wanted to point out this norm and science modes. So the norm will give you just your normal decimals for answers. Sci will give you scientific notation. So sometimes this is helpful so you don't have to count all the spaces in an answer and maybe get it wrong. Sci will give you your numbers in scientific notation. Okay? All right, so let's work with some exponents to start off with. So as I said, we're going to use that second function key. So whenever you need to do 10 to the second, 10 to the third, you're going to hit the second function key first. Then you'll notice a 10 with an X blinking for the exponent will show up. You're going to type in the number of the exponent, move your cursor back down, and then click enter. Okay, so I'm going to go over two quick examples right now. The first one, we're just going to show you exponents. And the second one, we're going to do this example problem. So notice on this problem, we're going to have to take 5 and divide it by 10 to the minus 3. Okay, so let me show you what that's going to look like. All right, so here is my calculator. So I'm going to start out with just a simple exponent example. So if you have, let's say, 10 to the third, so we're going to hit second function, and then notice, and then click your 10 to the x, and then notice that, I can get it without, that 10 comes up with the blinking exponent. We're going to type in 3, and then notice the cursor is still in your superscript. So use this arrow button to move it to the right and back into the normal number. Okay, and then once you have that, you can hit enter, and we get 1,000. All right, the second problem, we're going to do a little equation. So remember, we were going to do 5, and then we were going to divide that by 10 to the negative 3. So again, you're going to hit the second function, 10 to the x. All right, and now to make that a -3, on this calculator, you hit the negative button first, and then 3, and notice that gives us our 10 to the -3. Move the cursor over and click enter, and you should get 5,000. All right, so let's try one more problem. Just a little bit more complicated. So in this case, we're going to take our 5, multiply it by 10 to the -3, and divide it by 10 to the -6. Okay, so let's see how this works. So here's our calculator again. So we're going to take 5, and in this case, multiply it. Second function, 10 to the x. So there's our 10. We're going to do -3. Move the cursor back down, and now we're going to divide it, second function, 10 to the x, by 10 to the -6. All right, so that's what yours should look like. Move the cursor and click enter, and you should get 5,000. Okay, so if you haven't, go ahead and do those along with the video and make sure you get the correct answers. Because what we're going to do is move on now and talk about scientific notation. So sometimes this is easier when you actually have problems that are already in scientific notation, and you don't have to kind of keep going back and forth with that 10 to the x key. So in this case, you're just going to type in the number, and then when you want to type the times 10 to the whatever, you're hitting that times 10 to the n button, and then you type in your exponent. Okay, so if you want to look at this really simply, all right, what you're going to do is, I think it was 2.3, so we're going to take 2.3, and then this is just a main function key, so you're just going to hit that times 10 to the n, and so now notice it's going to put it in scientific notation, and I think we had a 2 there maybe. And then we're going to move the arrow, and if you click enter, it should give you 230. Okay. All right. All right, and then for the second one, we're going to do a little, again, a little equation. And note, this time we need to use parentheses because we need to tell the calculator to keep the 2.3 times 10 to the second together and the 1.5 times 10 to the third together, okay? So again, now what we're going to do is write out our equation with parentheses. So you're going to start with open parentheses, and then 2.3, our scientific notation, to the second. Now you have to move the cursor so you can close your parentheses. And then we're going to divide it, new parentheses, 1.5, our scientific notation button. We want to put 10 to the third here. Again, don't forget, move your cursor back down, close your parentheses, okay, and then click enter, and you should get 0.1533. Okay, so that's pretty easy. The only thing, again, that sometimes people forget is how to put those parentheses in correctly. One thing to note is it's always better to put them in than leave them out. So even if you didn't need them, the calculations will still work fine as long as you have them around your order of operations correctly. Okay, so here's one for you to try for yourself. So I've put in some of the parentheses since we're adding two numbers in scientific notation and then dividing it. But in order to make this work on your calculator, we have to actually put a second set in. So you've got to actually put parentheses around this whole numerator so that it knows to do this operation first and then divide the answer by 7.4 times 10 to the second. All right, so try that on your calculator. If you've done it correctly, you should get 1 as your answer. And if you've done that, hopefully you've learned a little bit about how to use your calculator for exponents and scientific notation.